The following is an exclusive presentation of Optimum Local. It's Optimum or it's not.
Suffolk County Controller Joe Sawicki tells us how he's weeding out state pension double dippers. Plus, we crunch all of the county's numbers. Find out how your money's being dealt with now on MTL. Hi, I'm Pat Halpern, and welcome to Optimum Locals Meet the Leaders. We're getting you to the heart of local government right here, right now, with Suffolk County Controller Joe Sawicki. Controller Sawicki, it's great to have you back on Meet the Leaders.
Thank you, Pat. Good to be here.
You can't pick up the paper today without talking about or reading the county's finances, both Nassau and Suffolk. I guess government finances all over the country. This is probably a common theme as municipalities wrestle with the impact of this deep national recession. And I want to talk about, Suffolk County in particular. You've been a county controller for some time. You've been through when the economy is booming and revenues are cascading into the county treasury and everything looks great. And you've been there over the last couple of years when sales tax revenues decline and state aid is not increasing for these mandated costs.
Right.
So you've been through it all.
Yeah, 10 years worth.
How bad is the situation now after 4 or 5 years of a tough recession?
It's almost like all of the predictions from the economists on Long Island and in the New York metropolitan area that New York metropolitan and especially Long Island, we were lagging in the recession. In the beginning, people on Long Island, a lot of economists and a lot of business people, a lot of government leaders didn't think that Long Island would be hit as hard. I'm going back 4 or 5 years ago.
So we got into it a little bit.
So we got into it on a lag, and I think we're going to lag out of it. We're on the lag end coming out of it. And that's right now, 11, 12, and 13, it's hitting us right between the eyes.
But so much of our economic activity, and I harken back to the days when I was county executive 20 years ago, during the last difficult recession, is tied to the real estate market.
Yeah.
People buying and selling homes, development. And when we see that stop,
right,
or when we see housing prices decline, it has a direct effect on the county's bottom line.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the lack of timely collection of property taxes feeds into that. It has a trickle-down effect to the towns, as you know, with the mortgage taxes, which is a big revenue producer for the towns, or it used to be. Going back to your other question about how real is this, one of the best things I think Steve Ballone did when he took over as county executive was commission that outside government task force.
Now, some people were skeptical. Oh, it's an outside
a good move.
group.
It was an
Why do you say
move.
It was a good move?
Because it gives an independent, objective approach and a real examination of Suffolk County's real financial issues. And what they found, what the task force found, which was headed by some top New York City fiscal experts, and of course that's what drew the criticism, is why you're bringing in New York City guys into Suffolk County.
But you're saying it was good to get outside people who will give a fresh perspective.
You need that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the scary part of the numbers that they came up with, and they came up with very conservative numbers, which we need right now. We have to prepare for the worst. We have to prepare for the most conservative.
And hope for the best.
And hope for the best. I mean, as we speak, for instance, we're putting together the final financial statements for 2011. And our deficit was projected by the task force to be $33 million. It's probably going to be closer to 50 or perhaps a little over $50 million. So, these are scary numbers. And the 3-year projection, as you know, was $530 million. It's going to be over $550 million now with this 2011 shortfall. Right. So we as government leaders need to know this. The legislature, the county exec, and the upcoming budget cuts that they have to undertake, they have to know what the real bottom line is out there that they're dealing with.
So the county is now in a situation where there were hundreds of positions that were only funded for half a year.
Yeah.
And I don't recall ever a situation where there was such a gap in an adopted budget. The gaps may have developed, right, and all, but the legislature didn't, ever set out and say, we're only going to fund this job for 6 months,
right,
and we'll figure it out then. You think that was a mistake on their part?
What the legislature was handed was a horrible budget.
Okay.
in September and October of last year in 2011. And they simply, it was so out of whack. The Budget Review Office of the Legislature, when they analyzed it, they came up and said it was, I believe the number was like $135 to $150 million worse than what then the county executive was saying.
Right.
And they said, okay, how do we plug in the county executive, how do we change the county executive's budget that he gave to us, put in our lap, without doing all kinds of things, raising taxes, raising fees, or whatever. So I think—
And even that wouldn't have been enough.
Even that wouldn't have been enough, Pat, you're right. But with the advent of a new county executive coming in, because the election was in November, remember, they said, let's just fund it for 6 months and then let the new county executive work with us to see how we're going to get out of this mess beyond July 1st. But you're right, Pat, I've never seen a budget just fund almost a little over 600 positions, actually, for just 6 months of the year. So now we're dealing with the layoffs.
And the other problem with layoffs, especially in a county with a civil service system, as all governments do on Long Island and the state, is that it's not a simple process to lay somebody off, because people have got what they call bump and retreat
in the civil service
so you're
system.
never quite sure how it's ultimately going to shake out.
Correct, correct. And they're running into, a lot of complications if you lay off people, say, for an example, in the Department of Social Services. Right. You remember when you were county executive, a lot of those positions are almost literally 70, 80, 90%, sometimes 100% funded by the state and federal government. So you don't want to lay off that particular position or person if they're, if it's not costing the county any money.
And look, we start off with the stipulation that if a job isn't needed and that function isn't necessary, look, we shouldn't be doing it, and we should take necessary steps to eliminate the position.
Right.
But the county has shrunk its workforce over the years considerably, so we're kind of down to the point where every position, matters.
Counts.
Counts. So when you lay somebody off where 80% of the salary is being paid for from other sources, that doesn't make sense. You only save 20 cents on the dollar.
I know. But when you add in the complication of the civil service system and the bump and retreat, and it's all guaranteed, all protected by state law through the civil service, as again, as you remember, it just makes it very difficult to try to protect a 100% fully federally funded position when that person is in the middle of the domino effect of the bump and retreat. It's very complicated and it's very difficult.
So what is how do you view your role as the county controller? You're in effect the chief fiscal officer.
Right.
You're independently elected.
Right.
You have a watchdog role. Your job is to make sure that the funds are spent properly, to audit. You're also there as a financial advisor to the legislature and the executive.
Right. Well put, Pat. And I think the most important thing that you said is that by being independently elected, I don't have any other bosses except the people out there that elect me. Just like when you were county executive, you answer to the people of Suffolk County. So you're not torn and you're not pulled by a legislature or a county executive. You answer just to the people. And you need that objectivity, you need that independence so that you can either conduct audits on your own and without fear of any kind of retribution or reprisal from a county executive or from a legislature. But even more so, it's just the idea that we're the oversight agency, the only oversight agency of county spending. And it's a very important role, it's a very critical role. And even though that the auditors that we have generate through audit findings more money than their salaries, than their salaries cost the county, we're facing, we're cut 20% since I took office 10 years ago, from 88 down to 68 now. So we're not escaping the brunt of this recession.
So how do you manage that, given the fact that your workforce is reduced by 20%, yet you still have all of these responsibilities? The county budget for all funds is what, about $2.7 billion?
Yeah, it's huge, and our department budget is like about $6 million out of that, $2.7 billion. But we continue just to do the best we can. We have dedicated people that work. They work hard, and you just have to not only audit, but you have to. We do the borrowing for the county. We watch, and as you said, we aid the legislature and the county executive when they ask us in terms of putting numbers together. Do they make sense? We don't get into the budgeting, though. The budget, there's enough budgeting people in the county now between the county executive and the budget people. The county executive, as you know, is the chief budget officer of the county. And the legislature, they adopt the budget. We oversee that the money that they adopt to spend, they basically say how much to spend each year and how to spend it.
And
we go out to see that it's spent right.
good accounting practice says there has to be a separation between the auditor and those that actually run the programs. Otherwise, that creates a whole. Otherwise, who's watching?
Exactly.
That's your job. Okay, we're going to come back with Joe Sawicki in just a minute. We'll be back in about 90 seconds.
Building girls of courage, confidence, and character who make the world a better place. That's what Girl Scouts of the USA has been doing for 100 years.
Did you know that Girl Scouts has 12,000 adult volunteers on Long Island? These dedicated troop leaders, board members, and others devote their time and talent to make Girl Scouting thrive. I'm Legislator Lynn Noack, and I was a Girl Scout.
Cablevision salutes Girl Scouts of the USA. Help make the world a better place. Call your local council today.
Without the group, is our water safe to drink? Without the group, could we play and swim in the bays? Without the group, would you want to visit the East End? For 40 years, Group for the East End has protected and restored Eastern Long Island's unique environment. Won't you join us? Group for the East End, protecting the nature of the place you love.
Welcome back to Meet the Leaders, here with Suffolk County Controller Joseph Sawicki. Controller Sawicki, we were talking about your office's role, your role as the county controller, and how that differs from the county executive, who's the chief administrative officer, and the legislature.
Right.
But you also work as a team, and you have to evaluate their actions. Whether or not a budget plan is crafted properly, whether or not it makes sense, whether or not you think it's viable. And you're in the middle of that right now as the legislature and the executive figure out what do we got to do to address this budget shortfall this year and over the next couple of years.
Yes.
How do you balance that?
It's sometimes it's not easy, but again, being independently elected is very critical because you have to give your own independent, objective opinion of certain things. We work very closely with the county exec and the legislature, especially their budget offices, when we deal with these rating agencies. And to back up a step, the rating agencies, the Moody's, the Standard & Poor's, the Fitch,
I mean, they're the ones who evaluate the county's fiscal stability.
Exactly, our financial status. And we just had a call just this week. We had several calls with the county executive below, and because we're doing, for the first time in 20 years, we have to do a revenue anticipation note, about $85 million, because
now, there are
our cash problems are there.
And here's the other thing people don't realize. The county gets cash, obviously, from property taxes and sales tax revenues, and we know, as you pointed out, property taxes are lagging because a lot of people are not paying them on time.
Right.
But also state aid. You get a lot of money from the state of New York, and I don't know what's happening now, but 20 years ago, they were slow payers.
They are.
Because they want to hold on to their cash as long as they can.
Exactly. And of course, the slower they are, the more of a crunch it puts us in.
Right.
And that's happening again. I mean, that's one of the, when we did some borrowing last fall, we pledge that these notes will be paid off by future state, we call them state receivables, state aid that we know is going to come in.
By law,
we just
they
don't
have
know
to
when.
pay you.
They have to pay us,
when,
exactly. And that leaves us hanging, and that puts local municipalities like counties, and I'm sure towns, in a crunch when they're waiting on Albany. And we know Albany's not in very good, Albany doesn't have a real good financial position these days either.
But it's the counties that have those big bills, the
absolutely.
Medicaid costs, the social service costs. And a lot of that federal money flows through the states and into the county coffers.
I mean, just as an analysis purpose, our $2.7 billion budget, a little over $1 billion, $1.2 billion, comes from the sales tax. And that's not the 8.625%. That's only Suffolk County's share of roughly half of that, a little more than half of that, the 4.6%. So that's $1 billion. So when the economy is down and our sales tax takes a hit, That's a direct impact on the county's budget, and that's indeed what's really hurt us. Big contributor. What's hurt us over the last couple of years.
So what are you telling those rating agencies that you spoke to, because you have to do this revenue anticipation note? What are you telling them about the path that the county is on, and because they're asking you, you're going to be able to come up with the savings that you anticipate?
They want to know what the county executive and what the legislature are going to do to solve the $530 million projected hole that the task force came up with, that made all kinds of media and received all kinds of publicity. They want to know how you're going to solve that. They don't care how you solve it. They don't want to know, again, these are Wall Street rating agencies, right? And they just want to know what is going to be solved. And if you don't have a concrete plan in place, which again goes back to the county executive and the legislature, that's where all the focus is on them these days, to come up with that plan, whether it be layoff, whether it be increase in certain taxes and fees or reduction of certain expenses. They have to come up with these plans, and the rating agencies want to see. If they're not convinced that you have a solid plan to deal with the 11 deficit, with the 12 deficit, they're going to drop your ratings. And when they drop our ratings, that hurts our short-term borrowing, because we'll pay a higher interest expense, as well as our long-term borrowing. As you remember when you were county executive, it all has a big snowball impact on the county government.
So in terms of the county's rating, we saw that the short-term rate or rating for the county bonding went down.
Right.
Now, I would assume that if the county is able to get on a stronger financial footing, that rating for future county bond issues will improve.
Yeah, we believe so. But again, we have to get there first. It was, Moody's gave us the most recent downgrade, and they dropped us 2 levels overnight. And they also went back to September of 11 and downgraded us retroactively for our delinquent tax anticipation notes. We borrowed $120 million in September. Moody's gave us the top rating. Moody's investment grade of #1. They dropped that to #2 retroactively.
What are the implications of that?
That tells the borrowing community out there, the financial industry, when they want to borrow Suffolk County, when they want to give us our money and lend us our money, we do the borrowing, they lend us the money, right? That okay, maybe we have to take a second look. Maybe we have to open up our eyes a little wider. Is Suffolk County on the solid financial footing that they used to be to be able to pay us back? Because if anybody's going to lend us money, whether it be some financial community out in California, a bank out in Oregon, or right in New York City, they want to know they're going to get their money back. So, and they all look on Moody's and S&P and Fitch to say, okay, is Suffolk County a sound investment? Whether it be for 19 years for our long-term bonds, or for just 10 or 11 months when we pay our short-term notes off.
Okay, before we take a break, I want to get your honest assessment. You got a new county executive. I know what it's like to be a new county executive, especially when you're facing big financial problems. It's daunting. There's a lot thrown at you all at once. How's Steve Bellone doing?
He is doing, he is really taking the bull by the horns. He's surrounded himself with great staff, and what I admire most in the man is that he's not afraid to reach out. I see him reach out to, not only to us, but to other officials, and he wants a consensus. He's a consensus builder, and he works with the legislature, and he's working on compromises and say, okay, together, let's come up with how we solve Suffolk County's big financial. So that, in my opinion, he gets an A+ on it. And it's a tough job. I mean, he's walking in as a brand new county executive, and in the first 2 months, his task force that he assembled tells him that he's facing a $530 million deficit in literally less than 3 years.
Right.
That's a tough job he's got. But he can do it. He's going to do a good job at it.
But as you point out, he can't do it alone.
Correct.
So that's why reaching out is so important. People say, well, why are you reaching out to the legislature? Why are you reaching out to the county controller? Because in the end, in order to be successful, people have got to recognize, first of all, the size of the problem, and then okay, what are the steps we need to figure out together?
Exactly, and
then do them.
And just like, as you remember, Pat, when you were county exec, it's like, okay, the county executive is half of the government.
Of the equation.
The legislature is the other half, and the legislature wants to be involved. They want to be important, and sometimes in the past, over the past 7 or 8 years, it was all more of a more of a one-sided show. The county executive wanted to run everything without involving the legislature, and that just creates nothing but hard feelings, and the end result is nothing gets done. So Steve Ballone is doing a great job, I think, in his first 100 days. He's coming up on his 100 days, so I'm just delighted to be able to work with him.
But as you know, look, there are certain things that the county executive can do under the budget powers.
Correct.
But there are a lot of things that require the cooperation of the legislature.
Especially if you're going to talk about layoffs, if you're going to talk about adjusting property taxes either up or down. I mean, whether you have a budget deficit or a budget surplus, you need the county legislature to pass legislation or budgets together to reduce the tax. If you have a surplus, you reduce taxes, obviously, or to deal with deficits.
What about audits? A big part of your job is to go in after the fact and say, you know what, the county has had this contract with you. We want to look to make sure that you complied with the requirements of this contract and spent the money, the taxpayers' money, properly.
That's a big part of our job as the control, and that's the part that I really enjoy because that gets the most publicity, if you will. And when you do an audit on an agency, and lately there's been a lot of homeless agencies that have come under the gun, and we've been looking at them and examining because they get a lot of money, and they provide a great service for the homeless people, you know, the poorest of the poor in Suffolk County. But at the same time, when these homeless shelters are out there spending a lot of money, we want to make sure that they're spending it in accordance with the county contract that they signed, and that they're not, you know, misspending county taxpayers' dollars. Because when we're doing an audit, one of the most first and foremost things we keep in our minds is that this is county taxpayers' dollars we're watching. We did a recent audit of one homeless agency by the name of Suburban Inc. And we found a couple of things. One is that the county overpaid them $885,000. They overbilled the county $885,000. There's a whole host of different reasons for that, but we'll probably end up going to court and suing them. And I'm confident we'll be victorious because we've been through this with other homeless shelters. When you go to court and you have to sue to get your money. But also what we found is that Suburban owned at one time 11 homes, going back to perhaps prior to your administration. Through a state grant, they got 11 homes, access to 11 homes to run homeless shelters. They were given those homes for free back in the late 80s. There was a clause in there that after 10 years, they're supposed to revert to Suffolk County. Then there's another 10 years of statute of limitations. We found, when we went in there to do our audit, we found that we were 30 days away from that statute of limitations when those homes were not given back to Suffolk County. We claimed ownership to those 11 homes. We got six back already, and they're valued at about $2 million. So that's not only do you find money misspent and overspent, but you also find situations like that. And if we weren't in there doing the audit, those 11 homes would have stayed right in the hands of...
Nobody would have found it.
Exactly.
Okay, we have to take a short break. We come back, we'll continue this discussion,
Okay,
so
good.
stay with us.
Did you know that autism is on the rise and every day more children are diagnosed? This disorder affects a child's ability to communicate and respond to the world in normal ways. While there is no cure for autism, the School for Language and Communication Development is here to help.
Help us find our voices!
Our children need to be in a safe environment. Our children need to be around caring adults who can mentor them and help them grow. Our children deserve the opportunity to be the best that they can be. The Hampstead Boys and Girls Club. We believe great futures start here.
Saving thousands of abandoned dogs and cats and placing them in loving homes. That's what Little Shelter Animal Rescue in Huntington has been doing since 1927. A pet can enhance your life in ways that you've never known. Please adopt a dog or cat from Little Shelter. Save an animal's life and enhance your own.
Haven House is a big one.
Let's talk about your audits. You were talking about homelessness, but you just don't limit your audits to social services. You also go into county agencies, and take a look at their systems, their operations, their accounting for what they're responsible for.
Absolutely, and I think the biggest accomplishment we've brought to the taxpayers, if you will, and to county government, is that the way the county hires consultants. Hiring a consultant sometimes can connotate not a good thing, especially if it's not done in accordance with state law and the proper request for proposal process. Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you remember all those days, right? The
Well, I have
RFP.
to say, you know, look, I'm on the board of the Suffolk Water Authority.
Okay.
And the state comptroller came in and looked at past practices and said, you know, Water Authority, you're not putting these, you know, your outside bond counsel, your labor counsel, and other consultants that you do have out for competitive bid. It's not competitive, but really request for proposals.
Exactly.
State the qualifications, there's a process.
Right.
And we were cited for that. I'll tell you, I'd never thought about it. I said, you know what, we've got to change that.
It's good, healthy government. It's good, healthy financial practice.
And it's good to take a fresh look at people that are out there who might be available.
I mean, for instance, Pat, the county hires as best we could tell. And that's another issue. We could not get our arms all the way around all the consultants that have been hired over the past 10 years in the county. When we started looking at them, the best we could come up with was a minimum of $53 million a year that were paid to consultants. $53 million. So we took the issue over to the legislature. I sat down actually with Bill Lindsay, the presiding officer, great guy, great leader over in the legislature. And he couldn't believe the fact that what we found in our audit was that all the departments literally hired consultants on a different basis. There was no uniform way to hire consultants in the county.
Right?
Some of them weren't bidding them at all. Some of them were just getting an emergency waiver. Emergency waivers were issued for the hiring of consultants more than 50% of the time.
Wow.
And when you do an emergency waiver, you don't go through the 3 or 4 or 5 quotes to get the best one.
Right.
So we developed, with the help of the legislature, and the legislature actually adopted our procurement manual for the hiring of consultants in the county. The prior county executive wasn't happy with that, because what happened is the legislature and the controller kind of got involved in what was literally the county executive's domain. But you know what? When you're talking about taxpayers' dollars and government, everything's open to the taxpayers, and transparency is a big part of our role.
But it should have been done as part of a standard procurement practice.
Absolutely.
So that whether it's the Department of Public Works or Economic Development or the Parks Department, the practice is the same, depending on whatever the consultant
That took almost 2.5 years to develop, Pat. As you can say, I mean, $53 million, and to be able to have an accounting of every consulting contract in the county, that's part of our system now, which never was before. So that's a perfect illustration of how we go out and we do audits on county agencies.
It's good work. We have to wrap up, but I do want to say you're an advocate for the state of Long Island.
Yes.
So what would happen to the 2 counties? Would it be a state with 2 counties?
Well, you know, your good friend and my good friend Kevin Law, who's now with the Long Island Association as executive director, he came out with a proposal. I think he was trying to top my proposal to go after the state of Long Island. He wanted to combine Nassau and Suffolk counties for consolidation savings purposes. And I said, Kevin, if we could do a state of Long Island, not only would we save $3.5 billion that we send more to Albany. You remember our old Albany days together.
Right.
Pat and I were both in the assembly together. $3.5 billion is our net loss in Nassau and Suffolk County. But once we became our own state, then we could consolidate Nassau and Suffolk counties, get rid of county government, have one state of Long Island, and then we could really save taxpayers money.
All right, Joe Sawicki, thanks for being that taxpayer watchdog that you are. We appreciate you coming.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of our show. I'm Pat Halpern, once again helping you meet the leaders. We'll see you next time.
America had just gone to war when Felipe Adams volunteered.
I knew what I was signing up for. I knew the consequences. I took a bullet to the side and left me paralyzed.
For Armando de la Rosa, the Navy was a chance to serve and see the world.
I got medically discharged in 2001.
Armando and Felipe were brought together by a unique organization that serves our paralyzed veterans.
If there was no PVA, it'd be a lot of confusion. Our training is to better the veteran. We help out with the auto grant, the special housing adaptation grant, education, prosthetics. Our main focus is spinal cord injury and disease, but we see anybody.
First thing he had asked me before he even asked my name was I being taken care of as a veteran? And I thought that was pretty good.
Changing lives, building futures. That's Paralyzed Veterans of America. To learn more, visit pva.org.